Destiny. Level 30 seems so far from me. Hello and welcome to part 2 of Destiny in Detail. This version of the video is a bit more lo-fi than the last, so don't expect lots of cuts. It's pretty much just going to be me playing the game for a while I talk over it. Sorry, it's not very good, but hey, you're just going to have to make do with it because that's what it is. There it is. Hello and welcome to part 2 of Destiny in Detail. As promised last time, this one will feature a lot of stuff, but I'm going to kick it off talking about the loot system. Is it fair? And if it's not fair, does that actually matter? One of the common complaints when the game first came out is that the rewards you get in the loot system aren't linked to your level largely, which means that although the best stuff is going to require skill, stuff like raiding, etc., mostly the game just rewards you for spending time playing it. You can be playing killing enemies at your level, or you can be playing killing enemies at levels about 10, 12 levels below you. It doesn't really make a difference. You're still going to get loot. And actually, because of that, you're often going to get more stuff if you're killing easier enemies, just because of, you know, maths. This, of course, becomes a lot less relevant once you hit the end game, but it's important to remember that, you know, the good 20, 30 hours of our time spent with it wasn't actually like that. But just on a surface level, this reward system, the system of just giving you stuff as you spend time playing. Now, if Destiny was a straight up MMO, this would be a huge problem. You've got stuff like trading, shared economies, hierarchies, sometimes in these worlds like almost fabricated societies. And as such, MMOs really need to be deemed to be fair. That's kind of an important basis for having them work. The way that traditional MMOs get around this problem of things not feeling fair and not just feeling like you're investing time and getting straight up kind of rewards on a very consistent basis was by adding knowledge. So rather than having skill, rather than having like, you're not good enough at MMOs to do this, it's knowledge. The better you understand the world, the better you understand the systems, the better use you will get out of your time. You'll use your time more efficiently. And because of that, you'll progress more quickly than other people. But Destiny is very different. There is a degree of knowledge, but largely there's this big skill element which is going to create some sort of friction in terms of trying to fit into the traditional MMO design. And that's why Destiny really isn't an MMO. I mean, it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. Because Destiny exists in more of a bubble, aiming to retain this wholly personal experience while simply giving players the sense of being a part of a bigger system, through things like synchronized events and group activities. On the one hand, this leads skilled players to feeling a bit cheated, knowing that others have reaped similar rewards for easier work. Understandably kind of undermines the sense of satisfaction that you've got if you are somebody who's really good at games. But if you will allow me to drink the devil's advocate for a moment, I would like to say that this system is actually quite savvy. What, Matt? What? Well, listen, it's quite simple, right? The biggest problem with online games, this is the biggest problem. Day 1, joy, absolute fun. You go online, all your mates are playing, brilliant. Fun. Day 7, the game is kind of screwed, right? You've got mates who are so skilled that you can't play with them without feeling like you're crap at games, or you're just so under-equipped that you can't play with your buddies because you just can't. Sorry, you haven't got the right stuff. You can't come and do the fun, amazing stuff that we're doing. Sorry, mate. And whilst this progression of skill and whilst this progression of leveling and stuff are two elements that make games really fun, you know, half the fun in an MMO is getting to the high levels, doing the high level stuff. Half the fun in a skill game, you know, something like Dota or something is feeling like you are getting better at it, but it's not good for social experiences, you know. It does tend to split up groups. It tends to be that you have a large group of friends, which then diminishes quite quickly until you're just playing with a small elite group because the other guys aren't quite good enough. Yeah. So I think because of this, the way you can progress through most of Destiny through easy tasks makes it a better social game. And yes, this does mean that Billy Dickface that you met in the Crucible gets a gun that you want, even though he's bloody crap at the Crucible and you are really good. And that's annoying, sure, but it does also mean that your old friend John, who's a bit crap at games, can still join in with you when you're doing the weekly strikes. I'll be interested to see how this continues when they add the first wave of DLC, but largely in the main core vanilla game, they do a really good job here of ensuring that you can consistently play with friends to quite a meaningful way for quite a long period, right? You know, really the end game is between 26 to 30.
And whilst, you know, being on the lower scale of things, being on like level 26 is not ideal for a lot of things, you can muddle through. And it means that the stretch from getting to 26 to 30 in terms of time is quite a lot of time, but it means you can still meaningfully play with those friends and do stuff with those friends. Maybe not the super hardcore stuff. Everyone's got that friend that you don't want to go raiding with because they're crap, but you can do other stuff with them. They're still your mate. But the fact that this system has kind of been frustrating for many people, this idea that you don't have to be great at Destiny really to get to level 30, you don't have to be great at it to do most of the stuff in the game, is odd. It's kind of an interesting cultural thing really, this belief that only skilled players should be the ones that get rewarded. I mean, certainly that seems fair, that's kind of a meritocracy, but it also creates a system that naturally creates divides and naturally establishes hierarchies. Now that isn't inherently a bad thing, and in a world which is often quite unfair, meritocracies are part of what makes video games very appealing. But in this case, this fairness of hierarchy, doesn't seem inherently necessary either. Because I think if the design of your game is primarily focused on creating a fun, cooperative social experience, then placing a heavy emphasis on skill and the importance of skill sounds like something that might easily undermine that. Allowing people to progress very far into the game without really requiring that they undergo any extreme challenges is something that kind of works in the game's design. I think it's something that a lot of people might think is a bit weak, but I think it's a good idea for a game which is primarily, for me, a very social experience. And actually, since the very, very recent patch that came out not long ago at all, they've actually improved upon that. They've now made it so you can spend your Crucible marks or you can spend your Vanguard marks that you earn from just doing stuff on materials, which means it's kind of even more focused so you can just do what you want. So if you've got someone who just wants to play Crucible most of the time, they can just do that now and they can upgrade all their stuff and get to the high levels by just doing the things they want, even if they're not very good at them. And that sounds on paper like a bad thing, but actually it's quite good. I'll be fascinated to see how they handle this kind of design in the future, because unfortunately the raid is the best thing about Destiny by miles. And I think anyone who's a big fan of Destiny is very excited about the next raid coming out in the expansion very soon, next week I think. So the raids are very different beasts. But we'll talk about this more in the future. Things like, you know, the future of Destiny, how it's going to be shaped. That's a big topic I'll come back to. But while I like this kind of easy optional curve, having said that, Destiny's relationship with difficulty is not perfect. It's far from perfect. There's lots of things about it that I really don't like. But one thing they have handled really nicely is the way the game feels and the way the game plays when you're facing traditional, just normal enemies that are a couple of levels higher than you, or just a level higher than you. It's very tasty. Suddenly the enemies become dangerous. You need to be really careful about how you move when you fight. It's intense. And the more time I spent playing Destiny, the more I became increasingly impressed with the way that the basic kind of functions in the game, the basic controls, really tightly fit into the way that the combat is designed. It just feels like a radical change from the strafing and cover mechanics that are used in most shooters. You've got enemies using cannons or mortar style attacks that force you to actually take to the air as an evasion technique. And of course you've got enemies that run up and try and hit you with melee attacks. That's not new. But the way that all of the air stuff, all of the aerial things like jumping, jetpacks, blink, whatever, it really does change the game quite substantially. I love the fact that, you know, my Warlock, the timing of my double tap, when I choose to press the button, drastically changes the nature of my movement. And you've got this serious risk assessment. You've got foes shooting you. Do you try and shoot back at them? Or do you leap into the air? And when you're in the air, do you try and take headshots, get rid of them? Or do you focus on finding a safe place to land? On easier difficulties, using the jetpacks, using the jumps, it's just silly fun. You just leap around shooting things in the head. Brilliant. But when you're playing harder missions, it's different. It's kind of like leaping into the air is potentially deadly, but also something that, due to the way the game is designed, is something you're going to have to do. It's a potentially life-saving tool. I initially wrote off a lot of the jumpy stuff as being just a bit of a gimmick, because, as you've probably noticed, a lot of games at the moment are doing aerial jumpy stuff. A lot of games are doing it quite well, but still, it isn't a gimmick here. It's incredibly smart but subtle integration. You do need to be leaping into the air. And doing that is a risk. It's clever, but as with most games, the carefully considered and largely successful game mechanics go pretty much straight out the window when it comes to boss battles. Because, oh god, some of the bosses in Destiny drag on forever. Absolutely forever. And this is the biggest problem we've seen so far with the issue with difficulty scaling. And the fact that it's actually a lot more fun to play missions on harder difficulties. It's a lot of fun when you're punching above your weight, but as soon as you get to a boss fight, it's rubbish. It's absolutely rubbish. Anyone who's played an MMO will be familiar with bosses that have massive health bars, you know? But MMOs are different, you know? You've got this kind of methodical, patient role, and you have to kind of perform your role in a clinical way to an order. And everyone has a role to play, and that's nice. But the thrill here, the thrill in Destiny, is the skill. And that tends to mean that the boss fights that have loads of kind of monsters and loads of enemies running around and waves and stuff that you've got to deal with are usually the ones that are more fun. But still, you have some bosses that have just been scaled up to have so much health, and your damage has been scaled down so much that sometimes you have boss fights where you just have to shoot the same guy in the head for like 40 minutes. That happened to me. And after about 35, we died and had to start again and do the 40 minutes again. And it's like, it's not smart. I mean, some people would say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. You're not high enough level to be playing against those bosses when I was doing all the strike playlist stuff. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe not. But if I can completely hold my own up to the boss fight, then maybe they need to be smarter about making boss fights harder, not just having bosses that one-hit kill you, and not just having bosses that have health bars bigger than Kansas. It's just, there's gotta be a better way. I've got hope that Bungie can sort this out in the future, just because in the situations where it has a lot more control over things, when you basically get to the endgame and you're in the raid, the boss fights are actually pretty brilliant. It has a better idea of how much damage you can be doing, I guess. They have less variables to mess around with, but it really felt like in the getting from 20 to getting to like the mid 20 levels in Destiny felt like quite a difficult trudge at times, and largely that was because I guess the leap between having kind of like rare guns and legendary guns was just too much of a jump, and if you didn't have really good stuff, you just couldn't do it. And I don't know, the whole thing was really messed up, and they are adding more strikes with the next bit, and I'm really hoping that they just completely fix their relationships with bosses, because I think this feeling that you're punching above your weight and you're having fun doing that is great, but it seems to me that a lot of the ways that people get around this, a lot of the way that people beat the bosses, it's all about cheese, and people are always looking for new ways to cheese the fights, and I don't think that players are entirely to blame for that, because some of the fights get really tedious. Something which hasn't got tedious for me yet is the Crucible. And prior to the changes they've made with the most recent patch, where you can pretty much just play whatever you want and muddle on through, before that, Crucible was kind of an integral part of the experience. If you weren't playing the single player stuff and the Crucible, then it kind of made progressing through the game quite difficult. But more specifically on the topic we're talking about here, in terms of design, it's really interesting. The thing about the Crucible is it seems to be quite regressive in terms of how it's made. The basics, well, it's very basic. And I can see in the same way that lots of people get annoyed at the fact that in Destiny you can kind of just trudge through and get rewarded. And this was a big thing in the Crucible. Lots of people very angry about the fact that you could just get loot randomly and always get points for winning. Really rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. But I honestly think that once you just get over that, and once you just accept that that's the way that the game is, the simpler kind of regressive seeming design of Crucible is actually really, really good. And the first reason for that is a simple one. Bring your own gun. Alright, yeah, that's just obvious. That's what the game is like. Fine. But not having to learn where there are good guns, not having to know where the good guns are on the map, and also just being able to load into a match and feel immediately comfortable with the equipment and the setup that you're using. That is so valuable to me in an online game. When many online games, I feel like when I first loaded up the latest Call of Duty this year, just jumping into a game with a preset selection of things that I've never seen before is just inherently very stressful, and it takes a lot of time to get your head around it. But also it allows you to own it. It allows you to feel a real sense of pride. You go in with your guns, with your stuff, and when you kick ass, you feel like it was you. And it does kind of help you build a sense of character. Not in terms of like, who is this man? Well, he got his gun when he was just age 16 in the Space Adventure Wars. No, not that kind of character. It's not about fiction. It just helps you kind of feel you're imprinted within the world in a very two-dimensional way, but a way nonetheless. And there aren't very many maps. There aren't very many modes either, which again, some people will go, why is that a good thing? Well, it kind of means there's immediately less scope for being out-knowledged, which is, again, a problem generally. And everyone gets superpowers. Superpowers, of course. It means everyone gets their 5 seconds of fame, right? Even if you're not very good at Destiny, you've had time. Everyone knows how to use it. It's not like in Call of Duty when you're fumbling around in a blind panic, trying to work out how to control a helicopter thing that you've never had before and will probably never have again before dropping the control on the floor and crying softly to yourself. It's not like that. It's nothing like that. You know how to use your super ability because you've done it on dregs hundreds of times. Now get in there and use it on some actual people and they'll be angry. Brilliant. Honestly, when they first announced the pricing and the content of the first kind of DLC pack for Destiny, I was incredibly angry. And I did actually kind of think, am I going to stop playing this game altogether? And the thing that turned me around, the thing that kind of changed my mind on this was when I dipped in recently to play some of the Iron Banner, which has been massively retweaked now. The first version of it was kind of weak, well, very weak, but now they've actually improved on it a lot, but it was still the same maps. It's still you just going around with the same guns, same maps, same stuff. Nothing on a technical level in terms of how it plays had changed at all, apart from some basic stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. Nothing really had changed, and it was still amazing fun. And I think that was kind of what reminded me that, yeah, all right, it is quite expensive, but even with these incredibly basic selection of stuff, it is incredible amounts of fun. It's the most fun I've had with a multiplayer shooter since Call of Duty 4, you know, the original kind of Modern Warfare, which was an amazing game, and I will fight any man who says otherwise. But I do appreciate that Destiny probably seems far too basic if you're kind of a hardcore player. But in my opinion, it needed to be simple enough for people to be able to dip in and out of it at will, right? Otherwise it would just become this wasteland. Destiny's multiplayer would be this thing that only people who are amazing at multiplayer would go anywhere near because of that fear. That multiplayer fear that people either know damn well and they're either now nodding going, yep, that's why I don't play multiplayer games, or they're going, what? Why would anyone be afraid? It's just a thing, alright? You're too good at games. We're not that good at them. Leave us alone. So yeah, on the surface, Destiny's multiplayer stuff looks light, it looks thin, looks like there's not enough there, it doesn't look like it's terribly good value for money, but with the minimalist setup it has, it achieves something which is just consistently very, very entertaining. I think one of the main things really that it is in dire need of currently is the ability to save separate builds. You know, it's very annoying having a character that you just have a character you can switch to, just 2 builds, because then I can play against the world and I can play against, you know, people. I need different things. Just let me switch between 2 pre-made builds. It's very easy, and I'm pretty sure they're going to do that because it's not an unusual or unique request. At the time of recording, I've only played Destiny for a measly 130 hours, and that's currently kind of fairly evenly split between multiplayer, campaign stuff, and chill out mode, which is also known as free roam, I think. Chill out mode, just call it chill out mode. Look, chill out mode is great, right? Because there's no one there that can fuck you up. Lovely, lovely. You can just ride around on a space bicycle, collecting things, shooting things. We don't even have to collect things anymore because they made it so you can just use Vanguard points and Crucible points. But that's a shame. I quite like collecting things. I know it's not popular, but still, chill out mode. Lovely. Some people have said that it's too easy to gain really great stuff just by roaming around doing public events, which is true to an extent. But personally, I really like the fact that they've made it so that the kind of relaxed bits aren't entirely pointless when you get to the end game, because there's a tendency when you're playing any kind of skill-based game for to get to a stage where the high intensity tasks are the only way that you can progress. You know, you get to a point where it's like, well, yeah, you used to be able to do that stuff where you just go and walk around the woods and kill the rabbits and collect the herbs, but now, like, nah, you need dragon scales. You're going to have to kill dragons, and it's going to be really, really stressful. I kind of feel like this is a trap that a lot of video games fall into, and you might not see it as a trap, but it's certainly why I've stopped playing a lot of games, you know, because if you fall off the wagon a bit, if you kind of forget what you're doing a bit, and then you go back into a game, and the only meaningful thing you can do in that game is something that is very, very difficult, it's very tempting not to play that game. And that might not be something that you can relate to, but, you know, I think a lot of gamers would be able to relate with that. And coming back to something that we talked about with the last video, there are legitimate complaints about the endgame. There's a lot of legit complaints. Initially, when you hit kind of level 20, it's initially a bit of a confusing downer, you know? The escalator is gone, the bink, 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 ding levels, the levels are gone. What do I do? You feel like you've just been abandoned to the whims of Lady Luck, like a man on a raft in the middle of the ocean, trying to win his freedom by playing poker with sharks. No one wants to play poker with sharks. But of course, as I said last time, this isn't true at all. Really, you're just changing tracks. It's all about Vanguard marks and Crucible marks and reputation. That's your new level. You've just switched onto a different set of stairs. The gear you need will come once you've put in the right amount of work. It's really no different from the XP leveling that came before that. It's just the problem is, if you haven't been working on building reputation prior to level 20, then this does take bloody ages. So I do think that that is a fault on Bungie's part. I think not making that change, that transition very clear, was definitely one of Destiny's faults. It's not something that I put the blame on players in any regard. And I think this is really exacerbated by the really confusing nature of the game's kind of factions. So you've got, you know, Future War Cult, Dead Orbit, these other guys. I guess the problem here was that you already had quite a lot of work cut out for you in terms of getting up to Vanguard level 3, Vanguard level 4, so you could get all this stuff that you needed. But then you've got these other side routes. You can join these different factions, but what's the point? And I honestly think that this is kind of, it's nice to have this sort of unknown. It's nice to have this constant evolution in the game, especially in a game like Destiny. I love reading the patch stuff. I love knowing what's coming, what's going to happen next. I don't know what they're going to do, how's it going to evolve. But this was annoying because you kind of think, well, hang on a minute. Is it worth leveling these up? Is there ever going to be any interesting benefit to level up, say, Dead Orbit, rather than leveling up just Vanguard? Apart from having very specific differences in terms of builds, I don't know, it felt like a real confusing element that could have been just removed. Because don't get me wrong, the faction stuff sounds really interesting, but it wasn't. I mean, if they'd had, so you have faction-specific missions or something, or yeah, any sense that the factions were part of the world at all. To me, the faction element did not help in terms of making the transition between traditional leveling and leveling for marks and reputation. That was something that to me just added a small amount, not a huge amount, but a small amount of confusion, which kind of damaged the game's ability to kind of make that transition simple and obvious, and I don't think it did it in any meaningful way. I really get the sense that maybe this reputation stuff originally had a bigger impact in the game, that you would have factions working against each other or working to outdo each other. And I don't know, I kind of be interested to see if they're going to do anything with that, but for me, being expected to invest into those without the assertion, without the promise that they are going to do anything, rather than just quietly disappearing, I suspect they're just going to quietly disappear a little bit, I don't know. We'll have to see, but so far, it's kind of felt very weak. Thankfully, though, this weakness has been noted, and it was very pleasing to see Bungie say that when they did the kind of Queen's Wrath stuff with the Queen and doing missions for her, doing jobs, they've just said that's going back in the cooker indefinitely, because it was really weak. Obviously, the Iron Banner was a lot better and has since been improved, but it's good to see Bungie realising that actually some of the stuff they've done since and some of the systems in play are a bit weak and needed improving. There was a wave of time when I really felt very unsure about the future of the game and the future of the sort of, you know, the IP. But their slow ability to start admitting that they've been messing stuff up is good. They've got a lot of work to do on that front, but getting there. Still, even when you know that the way you transition from level 20 to the higher levels is by stopping worrying about that and just starting to get Vanguard marks and all that stuff or whatever, the frustration you get in Destiny at some point is still inevitable. It's just a matter of when. Personally, I got really miffed at the point at which I got to level 28 and I just needed so many shards to upgrade my gear, which can only really be reliably earned from doing very specific tasks. Now, they've cut down the reliance on these slightly by changing the way that exotics work since the last patch, which is cool. But yeah, it can still get to a point where you feel like you need to get up a higher level and you can't because of this. You need somebody to just drop this kind of jacket, but it won't. There are problems with the endgame in terms of bottlenecking, but at the same time, that's kind of how endgames work. They have to do that. They have to keep people there. I just think that there's got to be a more elegant way to do it, and I'm really excited to see how they try and tackle it and the changes they implement in terms of how progression is handled within the next raid. And you know what? The messiness I've talked about in terms of transitioning from level 20 to the high levels, that kind of sensation of progress being stunted, the confusion, none of this would be so confusing and frustrating, or just plain frustrating really, if you didn't need to be at least level 26 to feasibly tackle the game's best content. The game's best content by bloody miles, which is something that I will talk about in the next video when I talk about the Vault of Glass in a bit. I'll try not to be spoilery, but hey, we'll see. And that's pretty much it for this video. Video number 3, part 3 of Destiny in Detail, will definitely be coming sooner than the last one. I'll try and get it out. Try and get it out before the expansion goes live, we'll see. But in that video, I'm going to be talking a bit about the Vault of Glass, but before that, I'll probably talk a bit about how Destiny is positioned itself and kind of why that's kind of made a lot of people angry, and how they've made a rod for their own back in many regards, but also hopefully talking about how they can get away from that and what they might be able to do in the future to try and make things better. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed the video, do come back for the next part. Thank you very much. Bye!